The movie begins by showing Gary Valentine, a 15-year-old high school student living in the San Fernando Valley, California in 1973. One day, as he walked the halls of his school, he saw her for the first time, Alana Kane, a beautiful 25-year-old woman hired as a photography assistant for Picture Day. It was love at first sight for Gary, and he knew he had to find a way to get to know her better. Despite knowing that Alana was older than him and sensing her disinterest, Gary couldn't shake off his feelings for her. He summoned up the courage to strike up a conversation and even dared to invite her out to dinner. In an attempt to impress her, he boasted about his acting career and the income it brought him, assuring her that he would be able to pay for their meal at the Tail o' the Cock restaurant. He nervously asked Alana if she would be willing to meet him there later. Although Alana didn't give Gary a clear answer, he decided to take the chance and headed to the Tail o' the Clock restaurant later that night. He waited patiently, hoping that she would show up. To his surprise and delight, she eventually appeared. Alana seemed a bit awkward and uncertain about why she had agreed to go on a date with a teenage boy, but Gary's charm and effort to put her at ease eventually helped to ease the tension. During their date, Gary shared with Alana about his passions for dancing and singing, which had helped him to land acting roles and start his own public relations company managed by his mother. However, Alana couldn't help but feel a sense of inadequacy as she listened to Gary's accomplishments. She pointed out that they were incompatible, with Gary likely to achieve even greater success in the near future while she may still be working as a photography assistant for the next 5 years, traveling from school to take student photos. She feared that Gary would quickly forget about her and their relationship. Despite Alana's doubts about their compatibility, Gary was confident in his feelings and assured her that he would not forget her. As their date came to a close, Gary walked Alana home and was able to get her phone number. However, Alana made it clear that they were just friends and asked Gary not to call her too frequently. The following day, Gary accompanied his mother, Anita, to a business meeting with Jerry and Miyoko, a couple who were interested in opening a Japanese restaurant in the San Fernando Valley. It was a busy day for both mother and son. In the coming days, Gary had a theater performance in New York and Anita had planned to chaperone him. However, a sudden change in schedule meant that Anita would no longer be able to accompany Gary on his trip. Gary was disappointed about his mother not being able to join him on the trip, but he saw it as an opportunity to invite Alana to come with him to New York instead. As they sat next to each other on the plane, it seemed like it could be a fun trip for the two of them. However, things took a turn when Gary's co-star, Lance, approached Alana and struck up a conversation with her. To Gary's dismay, Alana seemed to be quite taken with Lance, especially given that he was older than Gary. Despite her interest in Lance, Alana stayed by Gary's side during their time in New York, leading others to believe that they were a couple. She even patiently accompanied him to film auditions. However, upon returning home to the San Fernando Valley, Gary was heartbroken when he accidentally saw Alana and Lance on a date. Rather than confront them, Gary chose to go home and try to calm himself down. But he couldn't stop thinking about Alana and wondering what she was doing with Lance. Eventually, he couldn't resist his curiosity and decided to call her to see if she was home from her date. When Gary called, Alana was already back at home and thought it was Lance calling. Upon hearing her happily say Lance's name, Gary realized that Alana had feelings for his co-star and that there was no room in her heart for him. Heartbroken, Gary silently hung up the phone. One evening, Alana invited Lance to join her for dinner with her Jewish family. Alana's father was excited to meet his daughter's boyfriend and asked Lance to lead the prayer, not realizing that Lance was an atheist. Alana, who was unaware that Lance was not actually Jewish, had invited him to a Shabbat dinner with her family. Upon realizing the misunderstanding, Lance explained that he was born and raised in a Jewish family, but had stopped believing in God and become an atheist. However, Alana's family was deeply religious, and her father was not pleased to have an atheist at a Shabbat dinner. He promptly expelled Lance from the house and forbade Alana from having any more contact with him. As Gary struggled to move on from his feelings for Alana, he convinced himself that they were just friends. One day, as he was walking through the city, he came across a water mattress for sale in a shop. As he lay down on it, he felt an unparalleled sense of comfort, as if he was floating on the waves of the sea. Suddenly, he had a brilliant idea. He could start a business selling waterbeds. Excited by this prospect, he purchased the mattress and took it to an expo to promote it. As fate would have it, Alana was also at the expo. Upon seeing Gary, she tried to reconnect with him and revealed that she had broken up with Lance. Gary was overjoyed to see Alana and thrilled that she had returned to him. Just as Gary's happiness reached its peak, he was suddenly arrested by the police at the expo. It turned out that there had been a recent murder, and the suspect was described as wearing a blue shirt and white pants, just like Gary. Despite his protests that he was innocent, the officers took him to the station for questioning. Fortunately, there was a witness to the murder who testified that Gary was not the perpetrator, and he was released from custody, and reunited with Alana, who had followed him to the police station. After the incident at the expo, Gary and Alana's relationship returned to normal, and she joined him in his water mattress business. They promoted their brand, Fat Bernie's, on the radio and offered low prices that were much cheaper than retail. It's no surprise that their products became very popular on the market. As their business continued to grow, Gary and Alana became closer, and their age difference seemed to fade into the background. In an effort to further promote their business, they also began installing advertising brochures at Jerry's Japanese restaurant. One day, as they were working in the office, Alana received a call from a potential customer who was not convinced by her explanation of the product. Seeing an opportunity to close the sale, Gary suggested that Alana try using her seductive charms to win over the customer. To Gary's surprise, she was able to play her role so well that he became convinced of her acting talent. He decided to introduce her to his talent agent, Mary, in the hopes that she would recommend Alana for acting roles. During their meeting with Mary, Alana answered all of Mary's questions, following Gary's instructions. However, Mary's request for Alana to do a nude scene in a film came as a shock to Gary and made him upset. He didn't expect Mary to ask such a question, especially not of Alana, who was willing to appear naked in order to pursue an acting career. On the way home, Gary couldn't stop ranting about his dissatisfaction with Alana's decision. His jealousy stemmed from the fact that Alana had never agreed to show her breasts to him, even though he had repeatedly asked her. But when Mary, a stranger, asked her to appear nude in front of the camera, she readily agreed. Upon learning the true reason for Gary's jealousy, Alana became angry and impulsively showed him what he had been wanting. She made it clear that he had no right to forbid her from doing as she pleased. But she also made it clear that if he told anyone else about it, their friendship would be over. As they waited for Mary to find Alana an audition, they continued to work together to grow their water mattress business and eventually opened a storefront for Fat Bernie's. However, on the day of the grand opening, Gary flirted with his classmate, Sue, right in front of Alana. Heartbroken, Alana tried to intervene by asking Gary to check the sales report, but he refused, insisting that he could do it the following day and wanted to continue flirting with Sue. To add insult to injury, Gary later took Sue to the back room and began making out with her. Alana, who couldn't bear to watch any longer, stormed out of the store and went home in a fit of jealousy. To vent her frustration, she kissed a random man on the street. A few days later, Mary managed to secure an audition for Alana in a film starring the famous actor, Jack Holden. Upon seeing Alana's looks, acting skills, and posture, Jack was reminded of a woman he knew. It seemed that he had feelings for this woman because after the audition, he immediately invited Alana to have a drink with him at the Tail o' the Cock restaurant. Unfortunately, Gary was also at the restaurant, having dinner with another girl. When he saw Alana with another man, he asked the restaurant manager to give him a table directly across from hers. This sparked jealousy in both of them as they watched each other with their respective dinner companions. Moments later, Jack spotted his friend, Rex Blau, in the restaurant and invited him to join them. Blau was a director who had previously worked with Jack and remembered that he had done motorcycle stunts in one of their films. For some reason, Blau had the urge to see the stunt again and convinced Jack to perform it again at the nearest golf course. Jack is not one to back down from a challenge and was willing to perform the motorcycle stunt as long as Alana agreed to help him. In the original stunt, he had a woman hitch a ride on his bike, and now Alana would be filling in for her. The three of them, along with all the restaurant customers who wanted to see Jack's motorcycle stunt, headed to the golf course. The stunt was a success for Jack, but Alana was thrown from the back seat as soon as he started the bike. Gary rushed over to Alana, concerned for her well-being. After making sure that she was okay, he took her away from the golf course. In the process, they managed to reconcile, even though it took Alana falling off the bike for them to do so. A few days later, their business faced another challenge when Arab countries imposed an oil embargo on Israel in response to the Yom Kippur War. The embargo also targeted countries that supported Israel during the war, including the United States. The rising price of oil as a result of the embargo would greatly impact their water mattress business, as the main material for making water mattresses is vinyl, which is made from oil. As they made their final delivery to customer John Peters, he warned Gary and his crew not to make a mess while installing the water mattress. Peters would be busy picking up his girlfriend and wouldn't be able to keep an eye on them. If any damage was done to his home, he threatened to kill Gary and his family, including his young brother. Despite this warning, Gary and his crew managed to install the mattress without incident. The threat from Peters angered Gary and Alana, who felt that he didn't appreciate their hard work. In retaliation, they deliberately left the hose on while filling the water mattress in the bedroom, causing the water to flood Peters' house. To their surprise, they met Peters on the way home and he angrily got into their truck. However, his anger was not directed at them for their act of revenge. Instead, his car had run out of gas and he needed them to take him to the nearest gas station. Despite their initial hesitation, Gary and Alana eventually agreed to help him out and drive him to the gas station. Although they had agreed to take Peters to the gas station, Gary and Alana quickly left him there and returned to the location where his car was parked. Gary was still not satisfied with the initial act of revenge and chose to take things further by vandalizing Peters' car. Alana and Gary quickly realized that they had forgotten to fill up the gas tank, and so their truck sputtered to a stop, stranded on the side of the road. With no other options, Alana offered to drive the truck back down the hill to the nearest gas station. While Gary was refilling the tank, Alana spotted a poster of Joel Watts, a city councilor running for Los Angeles mayor. Something about the campaign's message spoke to Alana, and she was inspired to do something to make a difference in the world. The following day, Alana reached out to an old schoolmate of hers, Brian, to volunteer for Joel Watts' campaign. As luck would have it, Brian was able to secure her a position on the campaign team. It wasn't long before Alana had gained the trust and respect of the candidate, whether it was due to her own abilities or Brian's influence. Whatever the reason, she was soon given the important task of creating a campaign ad for Watts. She knew just the people to help her with the project, Gary and his friends. As they worked on the campaign ad, Gary couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy whenever he saw Alana and Brian together. They seemed to have a close bond, and Gary couldn't help but wonder if there was more to their relationship than just old friends. His jealousy eventually boiled over into an argument with Alana, and things only got worse when Gary revealed his plan to open an arcade as soon as pinball was legalized. He saw it as an opportunity to start a new business after his water mattress shop had gone out of business. Alana didn't share Gary's enthusiasm for the arcade idea, and their differing goals and values ultimately led to their breakup. They decided to go their separate ways, with Alana continuing her volunteer work for the Watts campaign and Gary focusing on getting his arcade up and running. On the night of the grand opening, Gary invited many guests to celebrate with him. But there was one person he hoped would be there more than anyone else, Alana. However, despite his invitation, she didn't show up. As it turned out, Alana was still at the office with Brian when Gary's arcade opened. In fact, they were so engrossed in their conversation that they almost kissed. But just as things were getting intense, the phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Joel Watts, inviting Alana to join him for dinner at a nearby restaurant. Despite the strong connection she was feeling with Brian, Alana couldn't pass up the opportunity to spend time with the candidate. After all, she couldn't help but wonder if Watts had invited her because he was interested in her romantically. She didn't want to miss the chance to get closer to him, so she excused herself from Brian and headed out to meet Watts. Alana was disappointed when she arrived at the restaurant and found out that Watts had only invited her to help him distract a journalist who was investigating his relationship with the campaign's winning chef, Matthew. It seemed that Watts was secretly gay, and he was worried that if the truth about his sexuality got out, it could cause political embarrassment. So, he asked Alana to pretend to be Matthew's girlfriend and walk him home, hoping that the reporter would think they were straight. Although it made her feel sad and frustrated, Alana went along with Watts' request and helped him with his plan. But as she walked home with Matthew, it dawned on her that she had been wasting her time pining after Watts and ignoring the love that Gary had for her all along. Without hesitation, she made her way to Gary's arcade, determined to confess her feelings and try to make things right with him. Unfortunately, when she arrived at the arcade, Gary was nowhere to be found. It turns out that he had gone to Alana's office, hoping to find her and talk about their argument. Over the next few days, Alana and Gary searched for each other in all their favorite places, determined to reconnect and make things right. And finally, one fateful day, they passed each other on the street in front of the cinema. Overjoyed, Gary took Alana back to his arcade, where he made a grand announcement to all the visitors. He was going to marry Alana. She blushed and laughed as Gary affectionately referred to her as Mrs. Valentine. It was a joyful and heartfelt moment, and they knew that they had finally found their way back to each other. The movie ends with Gary and Alana sharing a passionate kiss, surrounded by the bright lights and sounds of the arcade. The moral that can be learned from this movie is that love knows no age difference, and that it's never too late to find and pursue the person you love. While this message may be debatable, depending on cultural and legal factors, it's an undeniable truth that love can blossom at any age, and that it's never too late to follow your heart.